You're listening to the Winner Hughes podcast with Joe and Eric Hughes. And now, here's the Hughes brothers.
Welcome into the Winner Hughes podcast, a Bay Area sports podcast that unfortunately this year has been very heavily focused on the Oakland A's. And unfortunately, Rick, that means we've been focused on a lot of stuff happening outside of the field, stuff that's not happening with the actual team that people want to watch. And, you know, I've been joking with people that I didn't get into baseball to learn this much about politics, let alone Nevada politics, but unfortunately, that has become the reality of being an A's fan here in 2023. So we're going to get into what it was only a week. It felt like it was a lot longer than that with what happened and the reverse boycott. And maybe one of the cooler things that I can remember doing at the Coliseum, that reverse boycott that happened. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, you know, the latest with the A's in Las Vegas and, you know, any slim hopes that the A's may still have of staying in Oakland, and you know why there's something about this whole project that just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I think that there is some underlying unspoken thing that people in Major League Baseball, the A's ownership, don't really want to say out loud and tell us, because there's something about what's happening in Vegas and with Oakland that just, it's not making a lot of sense. It's not adding up. And, you know, what's that X factor? What's that thing that we don't understand and don't know? It's something that they don't want to tell us. And that's part of the reason that this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But we'll get into all of that. First, Rick, just want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the reverse boycott. On Tuesday, the A's had this reverse boycott. We talked with Stu Clary about the idea, where it came from, what the hope was. And, you know, just after we talked to Stu earlier this year, I think that what we saw was maybe even above and beyond what the expectations were, with the turnout, the atmosphere, the energy. 27,759 was the official total of fans that got there. But, you know, I think there were some people that probably got left in the parking lot because it was that dual event. But overall, Rick, just let's start with that reverse boycott, a really cool moment in Oakland. I want to give you a chance to give your thoughts and tell us about your experience with that.
Well, I think you're right. The dual event kind of makes it hard to really kind of gauge the crowd that was out there. You know, I think you can typically look at the A's parking lot to kind of gauge the size of the crowd you're going to get. And another thing that was interesting was some of the A's fans that were there weren't really even planning on going to the game. They were planning on showing their support by hanging out in the parking lot and being seen. So it was really great scenes, you know, for a really full parking lot. I know a lot of people were trying to tailgate and did it as long as they could, but then, you know, people started really looking for parking to the point where they went into the overflow lot. So just the initial scenes were just awesome. Seeing the big tailgate party for the 68s and giving out the shirts. We got there a little too late to get a shirt, but it was really great to see so many people there. Again, a little bit of a bummer with the dual event, especially if you had to end up paying $40 for parking there.
Part of the big expense was the parking, and I know Bart said it was the second largest ridership they've had since March. A lot of people showing up, and I've gotten a chance to cover these big games, the playoff games, the big events. You know, I was there as a fan when Scott Hatteberg hit his home run and the A's won their 20th game, and I was just thinking back about what are my favorite memories of being at the Coliseum. And this was very much on par with the 2019 wild card game, also against Tampa Bay, where there was a lot of energy there. It wasn't quite on par with those playoff series against the Tigers when, you know, Mount Davis is open and it was just packed to the gills, people waving those towels. That was maybe the loudest, craziest environment that I've ever been there at the Coliseum. And so it was, you know, it had a great crowd, 27. It was maybe a tier below that, but right there on par with that 2019 wildcard game. And I think one of the things that really struck me was how well organized this was. Like we gave a shout out to the Oakland 68s and, you know, how the hot dog guy and everyone was passing out those cheer cards. But that fifth inning moment when everybody was silent and it was quiet and, you know, a double gets laced down the line, nothing. Nobody's cheering, you know, even maybe if there were Tampa Bay fans, no one was on their horse. Everyone was kind of playing along with, you know, what their role was. And then as soon as it happened, you can hear the video, which we even have on our YouTube page, of how quickly that built into the sell the team chants. And that was maybe the loudest the ballpark was until the very end of the game.
I think it was really exciting to see the stadium that full, to know that it wasn't because of the playoffs and because there was something on the line baseball wise, but because it was a grassroots movement of fans that are rooted in Oakland. And really, like you mentioned, great organization. There were people going around to different sections in the fifth inning going, quiet, quiet, it's time to be quiet, fifth inning. And so it really was well organized, especially for a grassroots movement that started on Twitter. It was definitely a little bittersweet as well, seeing that, feeling the energy of the packed stadium when the stadium thing is up there, get loud, big noise. And then the next day, my kids are going, stay in Oakland, clap, 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 clap. So it was a little bittersweet. Yeah. It was a little bit awesome to see the Coliseum like that again. And then for also that day to be the day that the bill continued to move forward when, like you said, we didn't get into this to be experts on Nevada state legislation. And I was recently in Las Vegas. I was in a room of close to about 600 Nevada locals or Las Vegas locals and talking to a lot of them and just making, big things like, oh, the Bills died. A lot of them were cheering. I think in Vegas, there is a feeling that baseball would be cool. But I do think that in general, they do want their own team, much like they have the Las Vegas Knights. And there is a lot of support for that when you kind of think like hockey in the desert, those don't really go together. But the Vegas fans, they do deserve baseball. I do think like I can see the pluses of having a stadium on the Strip. I just don't want it to be for my team, So that's kind of where I am. And a little bit bittersweet, but just really, really awesome grassroots movement, and to see that play out in action.
I agree with you that it was a little heartbreaking in the fact that we brought our kids, and we had a buddy with us, and ultimately it was 6 kids and 4 adults. And what was really cool, all the kids had a great time because they were tapped into that communal experience that we've had, growing up and being part of that and getting to go there. Because usually when we've taken our kids to games, there's 2,000 fans there, there's 5,000 fans. And, that is a different experience. It's fun. They get to see Stomper, they don't have to worry about running around and, you're not going to lose your kid in a crowd because there isn't one. And that's a little different, but there's also a way different energy when the crowd is that big. And I think one of the cool things is there was a cheer for each batter of each inning. The first inning, and the first batter of the top of the half and the first batter of the second half of the inning. And that kept the energy constant. It didn't have those lulls. Like when you go to a game, you're fired up to be there. And then, second, third, fourth, fifth inning, nothing's really happening. And the game kind of dies down a little bit. That didn't happen in this game. It was constant with that energy because there was an engagement feature. And I thought that kept the energy up. And, like you were saying, it's bittersweet because our kids are just getting old enough that they're like really starting to like that atmosphere, to be a part of it, to be, conscious of those cheers and not just there for dot racing, which is a lot of fun. But it's also hard to think like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, am I going to keep bringing them out there so that we can, milk the last, remaining parts of this thing that has been important to us for a long, long time? Or do I just start shifting my focus and, telling, my daughter and, when we go out with your kids and things, like not doing that as much? Because ultimately, I know it's going to be painful for me and it's going to be painful for you. But, do I want to keep building this thing up for them that it's, pretty much looking like it's going to be taken away?
I don't think, they're old enough to fully grasp, what's going on and with the team and everything. But, another thing that's got to be said about that night was it was a good game. What was happening on the field made it exciting as well. And so I know we left a little bit early. Some of the kids were tuckering out there, and then the A's had a nice little surge, and because we hadn't heard it that full in a while, we were like, oh, that kind of sounded like a home run, and it wasn't. It was like I think a stolen third base, and so I was like, wow, that's a big difference when there's a packed house.
You talked about it. The game was so secondary. Like Hogan Harris, the rookie, comes in, pitches a great game, and it's like an afterthought. But you could see the emotion. Like Trevor May closed that game out. It was intense. And, for a team that doesn't have 20 wins yet, a game like that doesn't mean that much, but they had a win streak going on at that time, and closing that game out, getting that win in that moment for all of the fans, it was one of those things, because we've talked about it before in previous podcasts. Without Dave Cavill and John Fisher around, the people that are left to answer these questions about what's happening, unfortunately, have become the players and the manager, and they have nothing to do with the distaste that fans have right now towards the franchise. And I think our fan base is, smart enough to know not to associate those two, and no one's going out there and booing those players because they know that they don't have anything to do with it. But there was a moment, and I know it's a new team, where it does connect the fans and the team, because we've got a young team that, aside from Seth Brown and Ramon Laureano, there's really not too many guys here that have seen baseball in Oakland for long enough to appreciate, what it's like. Mark Kotze is one of those guys. And so you've got these young guys like an Estuary Ruiz or Ryan Noda that haven't had that same experience when the A's are good and the fans are showing up and getting all that energy. And that was really, for them, just like it was for my kids, their first taste of what baseball in Oakland can be like when it's done right.
I wonder what is going to happen with Las Vegas. And, I talked to a few people when I was down there, people that I was working with, some people that were Uber drivers. And I think there is a belief that a fan base will be built with kids that are 6 and 7 and start going to games right now, that in 10 years they'll get there. But I just kind of feel like, they're going to get their quick bang for their buck. They're going to have their new stadium. You'll have the people that are like, hey, Guardians are playing Las Vegas. Let's get the boys together and take a quick little trip. I don't know how often that's going to happen. And I just feel like in a matter of time, A's tickets are what you're going to get after you sit through a little timeshare. 90 minutes, you get tickets to Benihana and tickets to an A's game.
I mean, one thing that the A's paid lobbyists kept referencing is that they want this team to be in the 50th percentile for attendance. And they kept citing this number that they're going to average 27,000 and put that in the 50th percentile. It's a little hard to believe that number, given that the Wiggle Room is only 3,000 seats for a sellout. And there's a couple ways baseball is going to try to make this happen. And one way is season tickets, which they believe is going to be kind of a constant. Like we've seen this with the Giants. When you look and the Giants have a crowd that they announce of 27,000, and you look and you're like, there's like 10,000 people there. It's because they've got a season ticket base. Those tickets are sold even if people don't show up. So they can still announce that. There's a lot of ways of massaging those numbers, but what doesn't make sense is those teams that average 27, they usually have a ballpark that seats 36 or 40, 43. So when they have a night on a Tuesday when they draw 14, they can make up for it because they've got a lot more wiggle room to go to. If you're the A's and you say we're going to average 27 and our ballpark only seats 30,000, you don't have that wiggle room. You've only got 3,000 to make up for those games that will inevitably happen when you're not as well attended. Even if you have a great initial season when there's all that buzz and a new ballpark and people are showing up, over time, it's going to have a little bit of a lull. And the other thing, John Fisher has not shown a willingness to spend money since he's owned the A's, since he's owned the Earthquakes. His actions, his track record does not say, I'm going to now invest in this and spend money in the way that some in the Las Vegas or the Nevada legislature believes that he will do. And they keep citing, well, there's a lot of pressure, and Las Vegas won't take a loser. Really? You've got the Raiders. What are they doing? And you're still showing up to support them? Yeah, of course you are. So it's a little different to hear that, hey, there's going to be pressure all of a sudden to put this winner on the field. Why? Because John Fisher is going to be a revenue sharing partner. So he's going to get money from the owners. He's going to have a media market all to himself. He's getting money from Major League Baseball's media deal. So why would he feel the pressure? Because he's going to make money no matter what. And he doesn't have to worry about a lot of these costs that Nevada is putting onto themselves in this deal that they've made.
John Fisher doesn't feel any pressure because he has people that take the pressure for him, Dave Cavill and Rob Manfred, and they're the buffers before that even gets to him. So, there's been a lot of pressure on him right now with Oakland, with the fans, with 27,000 fans chanting, sell the team, sell the team. he doesn't care, so I really don't
Yeah.
think that he's going to care. I do wonder what will ticket prices be, because like you said, I don't think that they're going to invest in the team, and maybe they will, which would be another slap in the face. But I do think he's going to want to get some money back here, and I do wonder what those tickets are going to go for. And I do think they're either going to be dirt cheap because they just can't get people and they're trying to do the fan base, or he's going to just have them at outrageously expensive prices to try and get some of this money back for, going into the stadium here. And so I just wonder about that. I don't know. It's just, a bittersweet thing. It's one of those kind of hard to swallow pills, like you said, not being an expert in legislation, especially in another state, and kind of thinking like, oh, the bill died, we're in the clear, and then to go special session and to see like, well, so many of these people seem to be against this. But then it is kind of like, oh, remember that stop sign you wanted in your neighborhood that you didn't get? Well, we'll give you this. And everyone starts getting those little things in their districts. And next thing you know, stadium's funded. So we'll see what happens here. I know it's not all the way over yet, but a little bit. I am kind of tired of biting on the hopium and a little bit ready to just like, all right, let's start talking 49ers.
Completely understandable, and I think that that's one of the things that it does get a little tiring. And as fun as the reverse boycott was, it was undercut a little bit by you had this great night. The buzz was still happening, I think, for a lot of people the next morning. And then that was the day that really things kind of came to a head in Nevada to wrap this up and to move that to the next step. You're right. They have legislation done. John Fisher still needs to secure the financing. Major League Baseball still needs to vote and allow relocation. The bill in Nevada does not specifically mention the A's, so at the very least, the groundwork is there for possible expansion if, the A's were to wind up staying in Oakland somehow, though just hearing from Commissioner Rob Manfred this week, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of optimism for a deal getting done there. And, Rob Manfred had his press conference that was scheduled before the Nevada legislature approved that money. It was a regularly scheduled press conference as part of this owners meeting. I don't think he did himself or baseball any favors. And if anything, it was incredibly petty and disingenuous, his comments about the reverse boycott, what happened in Oakland, what's going on in Oakland. I think it backfired a little bit because we've seen Major League Baseball try to kind of censor and control their own media and their own narrative. But with social media, with major outlets not having to kowtow to leagues quite as much as they used to have to, the coverage was not positive for Major League Baseball this week. You had the commissioner of baseball coming out, and I'll read you the quote right here. He said, quote, "I think the real question is, what is it that Oakland was prepared to do? There is no Oakland offer," which is not true. "There never got to a point where they had a plan to build a stadium on any site." Again, that's not true. Also, it's the A's plan, not Oakland's plan. The A's came to Oakland with this very complex deal that was going to have a ballpark on it, was going to have residential, commercial, and retail space all on a 55-acre area that the A's would have controlled. That was the A's project. Now, they proposed that before the pandemic. Things have changed. Interest rates have gone up. The cost of doing all that has gone up. But the A's did not scale back their project request for a ballpark-only site in Oakland at either Howard Terminal or maybe reconsidering the Coliseum site. Instead, they bolted to Vegas for this scaled-down project that we don't even know what it is. They have some AI-generated rendering that was way bigger than the 9 acres that they've been given to build on. They don't have any blueprints built up. They don't actually have a cost. They're saying it's going to cost $1.1 billion, but how do they know that? Because they have no design on a ballpark other than some bizarre rendering that they put together that's way too big. So they're saying $1.1 billion. John Fisher still needs to finance all that. So you're right, it's not a done deal, but it's incredibly frustrating for a guy that didn't make his own money, inherited his money, bought this team that already existed, and is now looking at moving that away as though it's some like accomplishment. He's like, I built this thing, I'm taking it away. No, I have the money, I'm taking it away from you, and I'm going to do it in this way simpler project that I didn't try to do in the community that has housed this franchise for longer than I have been their owner.
You know what's just crazy is remember
The whole
when we
thing is
started
crazy. The
this?
whole thing is crazy. But yeah,
I was going to say, remember when we started this podcast, we kind of thought it would be like keeping an eye on the future, keeping an eye
right.
on Stu Ruiz and Noda, and, seeing like, hey, let's, keep an eye on this. And in 2 years, these guys can potentially be some, big name players. And now it's every time it's Vegas. It's every A's thread that I see on social media is about Vegas and Vegas and Vegas. And, it's a little frustrating because, like we've talked about, we're people that don't live in Vegas. We live in the Bay Area. We like baseball for entertainment. We go to games. We spend money on tickets, on food, on all these other things. And all these things are beyond our control. And there's kind of just like nothing we can do about it, and it just kind of feels like a bad relationship at this point, and it's like, look, we've been trying, I things aren't working, I guess, like I guess I'm not the one you're looking for, but we've been trying, we're doing things and it's just not working out. And so it just kind of, in some ways, I'm just kind of over it, and do I want to spend my time watching these games, and there was a good little Phillies game on Saturday and going to extra innings, which, they lost. But it does come down to like, how much more of my time do I want to keep investing in this, knowing that, like we've already agreed to break up, but we still live together. So we're just waiting to like everyone moves out, something like that, but it's just, it's a frustrating time.
Yeah, it's tough because the love that fans have is not for the owner. Most people have liked this team through different ownership group. If you were born in it, depending on when you were born, you've probably experienced 3 or 4 different owners of this team. And I think, especially with the A's, is that there is a tie into this community of Oakland and the larger East Bay. It's a group of people that like identify as underdogs and still believe that they are great and can accomplish great things despite not having a full complement of resources available to them like you see in other places. And I think that is one of those things, this thread that has tied people together. And what was really unique on that reverse boycott, looking around, filming around, it was a really eclectic group of people that were there. And that's one thing that Oakland offers that baseball has been looking for, at least what they say they're looking for, is diversity. And they're going to leave one of their most diverse cities and communities without really a lot of explanation about why. I mean, that's one of the things that we keep coming back to is there is something about what's happening in this whole project that doesn't make sense without something being said out loud. And John Fisher's not talking. Dave Kaval, for the first time in a long time, is not talking because when he has talked, it has not gone well for the goals that the A's have of moving out of Oakland. And, Rob Manfred's comments, as disingenuous as they were, remember, this guy's job is to defend the owners. He's not on your side. And what he has shown consistently in his time as commissioner is he doesn't care about the fans, not just Oakland, fans. He called the World Series trophy just a piece of metal. He's belittling the championships, the championship trophy of his sport in a way that like drew a lot of backlash. And, there was the shot of him doing his backswing when there's like a labor negotiation going on where he's just not seemingly taking it that serious. And there's this thing that happens, and I know you're in a different area, but if you work in corporate America, there is this thing that happens with these managers at this top level where it doesn't seem to matter what their specific business is. They'll always talk about it. They feel like their skills are evergreen no matter what industry they're in, and that the product doesn't really matter. The relationship with the customers doesn't matter as much. And they'll go on with platitudes and tell you the otherwise, but their actions don't back that up in the slightest. And Rob Manfred comes across as somebody who really does not seem to get his role in leading baseball the way. The best thing he's done is the new rule changes. And I get that there was a lot of flack coming back from that. It's been a success. But the media deals, the changing media landscape, and with like blackouts still being a thing, what they are restricting you from being able to watch these sports and how you can communicate with fans, all of that is just telling that they are looking at themselves as like a group of owners and the fans don't matter. We're always going to be there. And they're taking fans for granted that we are always going to continue to come out. And I think long term, you're going to be looking at other leagues, maybe the MLS eventually eclipsing Major League Baseball in popularity and drawing fans away and drawing those media rights deals because, right now, MLS probably has the best media rights deal with their deal with Apple right now of the major leagues. Maybe not as much as the NFL is making, but as far as the flexibility and the reach to watch those games, they're offering a deal that, I think a lot of leagues are looking around thinking like that's something we need to get in on. Another thing I did want to ask you about is I wonder what happens next in Oakland if the A's are going to stay. I think what it's going to require is maybe somebody who's a potential owner of a team coming to Oakland, quietly making a deal and then being able to come to Major League Baseball and, have that kind of clout and those kind of relationships. Joe Lacob is the name that a lot of people keep floating. And if Joe Lacob wants to find a way to keep the A's in Oakland and make that deal happen, that's the kind of way I could see that this happening is, either John Fisher's not able to get the money that he needs to be able to get this done. He kind of finds himself in scramble mode and maybe somebody else swoops in like a Joe Lacob that's able to present to Major League Baseball the financial backing that's required to do this and a relationship within the Bay Area. I know they left Oakland for San Francisco. It's a different situation, but, would he have the clout to get that done? Like, that's the way I could see the A's potentially staying in Oakland. But just like you said, I don't want to buy too much into the hopium.
Honestly, at this point, I'm watching some games, trying to take it game by game. We'll see what's going on here. It was great to get out there for the reverse boycott. Now I'm wondering, will the next one be my last one? Will that be the last game in Oakland? Which, I'm seeing reports now saying that they will play in Oakland in 2024. I was kind of thinking, will it be the last one this year? I'm looking for kind of deals now. Like, I think we saw a lot of people getting their tickets with the 2023 athletics code that apparently you get if you put tickets in your cart and you don't buy them right away. Apparently that's sent to you. Somebody shared that, and I think a lot of people were getting half-price tickets for that. So any other deals like that, that's kind of what I'm looking for at this point, to just try and watch some baseball, because I do it for entertainment and I don't do it to get into politics. So I think that's kind of where I'm going to be going right now, taking a step back and, trying to keep that same mantra that until the shovel's in the ground, I'm not kind of believing it, but also not trying to get so open that I fall for it again, so we'll see.
Lucy in the football kind of situation, so I could understand all that, and I wouldn't begrudge anybody who still wants to, figure out a time to go take their kids out and go do that. And, I'm sure that when we actually do kind of circle it that this is going to be our last game in Oakland, I'm sure you and I will make a plan. Like, we're going to do it one last time and go with our kids and have one last, moment and enjoy this. And, if it's not, and it was the reverse boycott was the last game that you attended, that's going to leave a good taste. If you want to remember, that's going to be ending on a high, especially for this team, because there's not going to be a playoff game this year with this team. So I could see all that happening, and, I'm not going to begrudge anybody anyway for how they feel. If they're really hurt by this, they're done with the A's, they're done with baseball. I totally get that, and I totally understand why that is a case for a lot of people, because we've been forced for a lot of ugliness. Right now, we're seeing the underbelly and how the sausage is made and how ugly the business of baseball is when you're not able to just focus on the product on the field. There's not a lot there to be excited about, not a lot to root for, not a lot of things to find appealing, and I can totally find that out and, agree with anybody who feels that way. But it's good to have a podcast again. It's been a little while because, you were gallivanting around Vegas, feet on the ground.
Right by the Tropicana. I was right around there. So, I
researching for the podcast. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Giving it really angry vibes. And the last thing I'll just say is happy Father's Day to all the dads.
All right. Well, happy Father's Day to you and the other fathers out there. This has been the Winter Hughes podcast. New episodes every Monday. And, hopefully we do find some good, positive things to talk about. And, we'll figure out what's next for this community. I think that's going to be another focus as you were talking about the future, not just with these young players in the A's, but the future of this community of A's fans and where they go from here if or when the team heads to Las Vegas. But we'll save that for the next podcast. You can find us on social media at Win or Hughes on Twitter. You can find me at Vegas Joe Hughes, which is just an unfortunate name that lasted. It was a long time ago, well before the A's situation. But you can find me on Twitter at Vegas Joe Hughes. New podcasts out every Monday. We'll also have this available on YouTube as well. Thanks for listening, and like and subscribe.
Thanks for listening to the Winter Hughes podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe.